So thank you everybody for joining us on this panel discussion. As we all very aware that this has been a very trying week for people to understand what is the protocol going forward in these unprecedented times of trying to navigate through this. So our area of focus is family law, and that includes maintenance and child care and contact. I think there's more confusion around co-parenting at this stage because we've had conflicting things coming out from the government on a daily basis. So I think we're at the point now where we have clarity, and we can confidently go out and let people know exactly what is expected for however long this lasts. I would like to just start with some maintenance because I think that is less complicated. There also doesn't seem to be a lot of clarity around maintenance because there's a lot of people who've gone to the maintenance courts and they've been turned away because the courts are not letting anybody in to process anything to do with maintenance. Other courts have allowed them into the courts this week. No social distancing, as I don't know if any of you saw the photographs that I put up of one court. I did report it to the court manager. And then there's also, and the ones that have managed to get to court, the cases have all been postponed. So the uncertainty now is, do those who have court cases during this period still go to court?
Felicity, if I can just say, I've been in court the whole of this week, obviously in Durban High Court, Maintenance Court. It's been pretty much business as usual. So all my matters have proceeded. The only thing that's been different is that obviously they've encouraged social distancing. So, you know, they've asked for people not to sit close to each other, and, you know, and even in the courts there's designated areas for us to sit, so we can't sit too closely together as we usually do. That's all I can say from Durban, and from what I've heard is that interim maintenance orders will be heard, right? And obviously interim protection orders will be heard as well. Whether that's actually going to be seen, I can only tell you from what I've experienced. Durban courts, the regional, maintenance, and high courts have been proceeding throughout the week.
Okay, can I come in here?
Yes.
Okay, I'm speaking I'm speaking from the Eastern Cape, and we manage services in this London Magistrates Court, Undansani Magistrates Court, and so forth. And we're working remotely at the moment, but the directives from the Minister of Justice, which I've just reviewed now for this particular area, says that they're dealing with all domestic violence cases and all child-related cases, but not maintenance for the lockdown period. So up until, I think, Friday, it was still operating, but in the period moving forward, they won't be dealing with the actual maintenance cases right now, but they will be dealing with domestic violence and child rights issues. So that might just be for the next 21 days. I know that in the last week, our councillors have been able to secure protection orders for women. So that has proceeded. You're quite correct there, Ayesha. And I think that it will proceed, and it'll still, you know, they'll be able to secure those in the period moving forward. It is a bit complicated because of the moving around and, you know, that sort of thing. But I think it has got priority. I've spoken to some of the SAPS guys here at provincial level, and they say it is a priority issue because they're very clear that domestic violence will increase over this period.
I think if I can just speak on the maintenance aspect in Cape Town,
Yes.
Before the lockdown, basically, it was business as usual. There was social distancing, but in terms of according to what I had, the latest regulations on the 26th of March, it's basically said that maintenance matters will be dealt with, first applications for maintenance, as long as all the relevant information is provided, as well as applications in respect of enforcement of maintenance. However, so many of the courts are implementing different procedures in terms of telling people what they're going to hear and what they're not going to hear. So what has happened, what I've had to do is actually phone each court where I have a matter to find out how they're operating with maintenance and other matters.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry,
That's what we've been encouraged to do. Yeah, sorry, Felicity, that's what we've been encouraged to do, is to phone the representative courts wherever you'll be attending and just ask them if the matter will be proceeding or not. And I think for a lot of the public, if they are unable to attend, then I would suggest they call their courts. As you can see, it's region specific, as you can see from what we've been saying. So I would suggest the public contact the represent whichever court they're going to attend. And if they can't attend on the day, to ask for the message. I don't see that being a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think a question that we need to just address, which has come up quite often on my group, is if they are unable to attend court for a court date that has already been set down, and they cannot get hold of the court, what will the repercussions be?
I'll maybe jump in here. My understanding would be the court has to take a very cautious approach. So seeing that you are in a state of lockdown, if a party to the matter, for example, either the father or the mother is not there, the most responsible thing to do is postpone this matter to after the end of the lockdown period. Even if the court grants an order by default, it will actually be a bit useless in the sense of who will execute it, the employers aren't there, etc. So I think under those circumstances, the court will definitely take a cautionary approach by just remanding the matter and trying to inform the parties to come back to court after the lockdown period.
Thank you for that. Because also, I think that a lot of the courts, I've been informed by some people who work within the courts that they are going to be working on skeleton staff. So the likelihood of people actually getting through telephonically are probably very slim. So going forward, to put out some kind of reassurance that it will be considered and that in all likelihood these cases will just automatically be postponed.
Yeah, that makes more logical sense, because imagine the court deals with a matter knowing full well there could be good reasons why the parties aren't here. So that will be irresponsible on the court's part. And should they still deal with the matter, what will happen after 3-4 weeks? The parties will make an application for the variation of the order, or the setting aside of the order. So we'll just basically be wasting the court's time. And also at the same time, there is an issue concerning the skeleton staff.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the whole issue of permits. I mean, the legal representatives are having to jump through quite some hoops to be able to get permits. Yet the impression is that people who've got court dates and these courts are open just move off to the courts without a permit. It's all a bit confusing, isn't it?
So there is uncertainty, Felicity, there is uncertainty about the permits. There's conflicting things that have been sent out, but the latest that I've heard is that the Legal Practice Council, I know in the Western Cape at least, is actually contacted, or is trying, or have maybe contacted by now, the Minister of Justice, in order for him to change his latest regulations that he's made. I haven't heard anything from them, but yes, there is conflicting, and there's also issues about turnaround time, about every single, or not every single, but most practitioners needing permits for their matters that are on the roll, or even for urgent matters like bail or domestic violence urgent matters. So at the moment we're in the dark, and we're hoping that most of us get permits for the urgent matters that we do need them for.
Yeah, I think at the moment in KZN, they've asked us to give an indication of exactly when our matters are in court, to provide the court with a case number, and then they will issue a permit based on that. Now, my colleagues will agree with me, that's virtually impossible, especially in the cases of bail applications and urgents. We cannot, I mean, I could have been served with an urgent late yesterday and it could be in court on Monday. You know, the LPC is not going to give me a permit limit in this time, what do I do? So Nicole's 100% correct. They have escalated the matter so that we can get better direction, because it's highly impractical for us to, for every court case that we need to attend, especially for practitioners who are specializing in criminal law and specializing in family law. It's impossible for us to give a number of dates. Anything could happen.
Okay. So I suppose these directives now that they put under some pressure to give clarity will start also coming out in the next couple of days.
Mm.
And another question that has come up is that some people who have maintenance orders against them and have primary care during this time by agreement, which is also not quite according to the parenting plan, are now refusing to pay maintenance because they have the children with them.
My understanding, okay, Nicole, you go ahead.
Mohammed, go ahead, it's fine.
Okay, I think the bottom line over here is if there's an order in place, the order has to be adhered to. However, during this lockdown period, obviously people will have some challenges in how, if they can firstly afford to pay the maintenance, or how are they to get the maintenance paid to the other party, because some people want the maintenance to be paid in cash, some people want it to be done via, not EFT, but actually a cash deposit to the bank account. So those are the technical issues. But the bottom line is the court order still stands, and even if there is an issue regarding where the child now remains longer with one parent, they can always come back to the court after the lockdown period and say, I incurred more expenses for the child than I usually would have, and therefore the court will have to now obviously relook those type of expenses.
Okay. And then, so I have one more question, and this is, I suppose, one of those where we don't actually know the answer is, there's obviously a lot of people impacted by the virus and are uncertain whether they're going to even have a job anymore, and a lot of them have already had their income streams cut off. So they're wanting to kind of get an understanding of how to proceed after this. Again, a grey area because this is unprecedented. But again, there's a court order in place. The courts are going to be flooded with like arrear cases and people trying to show proof that they actually weren't employed. But then on the other hand, that this is being used vindictively by parents where there is already a high level of conflict. And we know that financial abuse is a very normalized form of abuse, pre-existing prior to this. And this is just going to be exasperated under the current circumstances. And we're really seeing it playing out where the control and power through money is being used against the other parent. And ultimately the child is suffering because right now, most people are, our biggest concern is being able to feed ourselves. Leslie?
Yeah, I think there are a number of issues, you know, around economic factors at the moment. I think, you know, there's a lot of disinformation, but I've also come across a lot of people that have just arbitrarily been retrenched, women in particular. And I mean, the Western Cape, I've come across that. In the Eastern Cape, people have written to us, you know, to tell us that. The first thing is the companies are contravening the actual law because the president was very clear that there will be relief for companies that are struggling, and they should not be doing this, but they're taking a chance. You know, everybody's taking a chance, and that's dangerous to families. So people were just called in on Friday and said, you know, you have to stop work, we can't pay you anymore. And then we've got, from job law, got all the regulations that have come out in that regard. And so women can look for relief in that way. And I think there is immediate and urgent relief that is available, both through an application through social development and then the Department of Law. So I think that can happen. I think in terms of, yeah, I mean, you know, money is about power and control. Violence against women is about power and control. And men will use this. Any kind of tool they can get against women. So you will see an escalation of that, and unfortunately the women will have to go to court, you know, to get the relief at this particular time. And I think because we know that the courts are just seen, one of the magistrates has responded to me and said that they will hear these matters, you know, that are putting women into dire circumstances, because particularly there's first responsibilities to the child or children. You know, so we've got to look at what are the mechanisms for relief. And every case will be different. Every case will be different, but there is a principle. And the principle is that both parents are responsible for that child. If the father or the mother has financial responsibility, they have to fulfill it at this particular time, even more so now that we're in lockdown than previously.
Okay. I think that kind of covers maintenance up, and we'll just have to keep unraveling it as we go forward. I think that a very pressing issue at the moment and very controversial one is co-parenting. So this has been a backwards and forwards the whole week. So I'd like to start with Ayesha to just put absolute clarity, because Ayesha's been at the forefront trying to get clarity for herself and her clients, but also as vice chairperson of Child Maintenance Difficulties in South Africa, you know, trying to keep us abreast in terms of how we can advise the general population. Ayesha, do you want to just, I think let's start where we stand currently so that we can bring clarity to that.
Okay, so rightfully so, Felicity, this has been a week from hell is an understatement, because we, at the onset of this lockdown, when it was, you know, when we were told there's going to be a lockdown, there was very little clarity on what's going to happen with the issue of co-parenting. You know, I've been in practice for quite a while. I can tell you my instructions and inboxes, this has been an unprecedented week with the amount of queries, you know, women who, not even my clients, who have come begging at my door for assistance here. So it's a huge, huge issue. And I have really gone over and above my call of duty to try to get some answers on this. As you know, you and I have been discussing this the entire week online. Right now, as it stands, I think there's enough directives that have been released. I think there's enough judgments that have been urgent matters that have been heard in this regard. And as it stands today, and I know I'm going to get attacked from the powers that be because there is still a lot of controversy around it, but as it stands today, from my understanding, is that children are not to be moved during the lockdown. Right? It is highly not advisable for them to be moved around during this time. You know, the first and foremost, at the forefront of this, we have to take into consideration the best interests of the child. We are in the middle of a pandemic. We are in waters that we have not been in ever. Coming to, you know, the legal profession, advocates, attorneys, even the courts, we have never experienced something like this before, which is why it's taken such a long time for us to get direction on how this should be dealt with, taking into consideration everybody's rights, the rights of dad, the right mom's rights, as well as the rights of the children. I think that there is not enough hour on Thursday. There was a lot of controversy around the directives that were released. In paragraph 8.2, it said that matters relating to the movement of children will be considered. People then interpreted that as children can be moved. You know, it later then came out that that was not exactly what the directives were aimed at. The directives were saying that issues relating to the movement of children will be heard if it is in the interest of justice. So I'm going to be bold and I'm going to take a stand and say that, in my professional opinion, children should not be moved during this time. My colleagues can disagree with me, but that's my stance on it.
I agree with Ayesha, because the problem with advising a client otherwise, Ayesha, you know, when we deal with custody and child you know, contact issues, you know, we sit with a client for 3-4 hours and then we make an assessment on the matter and then we present those, you know, information to the judge and to the family advocate, and only then can the court make a decision as to whether or not contact should be exercised or not. So it's very difficult for me as a legal practitioner, based upon a 3-line WhatsApp or a short email, to make a decision and say, yeah, therefore you can go against the order. So obviously there's no directives that allows and overrides the directive from the president or from the government saying that we're in a state of lockdown and the children should remain at home. But there are some judges or some people, some courts that may, you know, order otherwise, but that judge will obviously have all the information in front of him. Obviously, the child in a state of dire need, emergency, his life and death is at stake here, and he needs to go to a different parent because the father is probably on drugs, he's drunk, he had a, something happened. There, the court will obviously walk in and say, look at here, the child must be taken out. Going to the pharmacy is something, not as important than going to take a child out of a life and death situation. But on the whole, on the blanket answer, which I always give to everybody, is please, unless the government gives a directive specifically allowing for the parenting plan or the contact and care order to be enforced, the child is to remain by one parent until the end of lockdown.
100%.
If I can just add on that point, in agreement with Ayesha, is that basically the regulation did say that arrangements regarding children in terms of the movement of children in terms of a parenting plan, it says must be attended to. It doesn't mean, my interpretation, I think I'm in agreement with Ayesha, it doesn't mean that parents now have to comply with the parenting plan in terms of moving child back and forth between mother and father. It means that the court must attend to such matters where arrangements are in a parenting plan. I agree with Ayesha. I have, though, I mean, even my own clients, I said, just be reasonable and obviously put your the safety of your children and yourself first. And if that means for 21 days your child doesn't move to the other parent, then that should be it. And there's obviously alternative ways to for the parent and the other parent to communicate with each other. And maybe after the lockdown, hopefully it's not 21 days, but basically after the lockdown, then that time can always be made up afterwards.
Leslie?
This is a very sticky or thorny issue, because once again, children are used as pawns in the fight between parents. And a lot of the time, I mean, we see this all the time where men use the children, they run off with the children, they keep them away from the mother. And I mean, it's just such a vile form of violence, because it adds to the stress of the woman, where the woman is in isolation. She has the fear of being ill, she has the fear of unemployment, she has the fear of, not having the support, and then she has her children taken away from her. So psychologically, this has an enormous impact on women. And I think we'll see a rise in mental health problems that women have. They have mental health problems when they're in domestic violence, situations of domestic violence. They have mental health issues like anxiety and depression when the partner, former partner, whatever, puts a lot of pressure on them. And partners know this. So they will make a ploy at trying to take the children away, and then this would leave the woman in a far more vulnerable situation. And sometimes women do desperate things, they would try and go and get the children. And of course, I mean, I agree that the best interest of the child is not to move the child around. But there's also the case of is the child in the place, that they should be? Are they safe? Are they protected? Are they happy? I mean, we really have to look at the best interest of the child. I think the courts are going to have a bit of a hard time with that. And I've seen the regulations, they're saying that they will, the courts will hear matters related to children. So obviously they're expecting, to have something to be quite concerned about this. I think it's something, I sit on the Presidential Committee for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, and we were talking yesterday about how to increase and spread the support for women across the country, because right now, women will be cut off from the support they normally have. And sometimes just being able to go to the shop or to go to work for the day is a form of relief. And so for other women, they're going to now have the burden of childcare, the burden of care of the elderly, and then dealing with the violence that comes from, a former partner. So yeah. I think the courts have to really take some of that into account.
Okay. Just so we've had a few questions asked where before the shutdown, the children went to the non-primary caregiver and they're now stuck there. And these people don't have the finances to do a high court application. And in some instances, the other parent is an essential service, and they are open to being exposed, what is the mother's recourse in these circumstances?
Nicole?
Well,
Yeah.
I think
So
that
without legal representation.
Yeah, well, we have, we have our paralegals who actually go to court and represent the women there, and it's not difficult. It's not difficult to be able to go in and present the case, and as I said, it says that the courts will hear cases related to children. So I mean, if they can make a very solid case, then it may be in the best interest of the child to move that child, But I think the case has to be very strong, because I think there's just such a lot of danger right now in moving children from one party to another. And I think that has to be taken into account. I think the parent, who wants the children back has to give that due consideration.
Okay.
But it is possible. It is. I mean, it's not impossible. And I think it's, the court would be willing to and open to hearing cases like that. Certainly in East London, and Umdansani, it would happen. Yeah. But there's also, for us, we've been in those courts for the last 20 years. We have the networks. I'm not sure how women in other provinces would do this, where there isn't a relationship and a sensitization of court officials, because that's also a big problem we still face in this country today.
Okay, I think that we're out of time, but I would really, I'll contact you all privately. I think that maybe what we should do is focus on certain issues and unpack those further, because women and people just don't know where to go to get information. A lot of them, they're all over and they're getting incorrect advice, and I do have the network and able to disseminate a lot of information. So I'll be in contact with all of you privately, and let's see how we can, during this period of time, what else of value can we put out there? And there's going to be other issues that are going to